The Miami Dolphins 2023 Prospect Spotlight Series continues with Texas linebacker DeMarvion Overshown, who he is, how he would fit the Dolphins scheme, and where the Dolphins may be able to land him in the 2023 NFL Draft.
You are Locked On Dolphins, your daily Miami Dolphins podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, Miami. Welcome to another episode of Locked On Dolphins. It's your team every day here on the Locked On Network. Today is Friday, April 21st, 2023. I'm your host, Kyle Krabs. I want to thank you guys for making Locked On Dolphins your first Miami Dolphins listen of the day. Special shout out to our everydayers who are here and locked in, because it is your team every day here on the Locked On Network. You can find us on YouTube or wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. Yours truly, lifelong Miami Dolphins fan, decade-long draftnik, co-host of the Locked On NFL Scouting podcast, which is dedicated to team building across the entire NFL. And we're doing a little team building exercise here on Locked On Dolphins because we are looking at a potential addition to the Dolphins' back seven. And of course, the Dolphins made some significant changes on the defensive side of the ball this offseason, changing from defensive coordinator Josh Boyer to Vic Fangio. And that in itself is enough to inject a lot of enthusiasm and excitement about a rebound on that side of the football. But then there's David Long at linebacker, and there's Jalen Ramsey at cornerback, and there's Sean Elliott at safety. The Dolphins have made some meaningful additions, and they may not be done. And there's some whispers and rumors about interior defensive line being an area that might be an addition opportunity for the Dolphins. And they've shown interest in DeMarvion Overshown specifically at linebacker. And that is the subject of today's deep dive. Texas linebacker DeMarvion Overshown has kind of been on the radar for a little while now. He's been a pretty buzzy name for the past several seasons, because of his elite physical traits that he brings to the table. And that would be a continuation of what we've seen the Dolphins go after on the defensive side of the ball. Fast, rangy, explosive hitters and explosive athletes with some versatility. So we're going to take the time today to go through DeMarvion Overshown, who's a player who the Dolphins had a visit with, and talk about who he is, how he would fit the scheme, and where the Dolphins may or may not be able to draft him in the 2023 NFL Draft. So let's start with the biographical background. Who is this player, DeMarvion Overshown? He was a highly coveted recruit out of the state of Texas. He was ranked by ESPN as the number 2 prospect in the state of Texas, ranked number 5 in the state of Texas by 247 Sports. It's a top 50 player, top 55 player nationally in just about every major recruiting service. As a safety. So don't be surprised when we get to the athletic profile here and the stature. And this is a player who has moved his way forward as he's gotten into the weeds of being a starter for the University of Texas. Now, he is a 3-year starter. He's a redshirt senior. He did go to the Reese's Senior Bowl this offseason, so we got a chance to see him up close and in person in Mobile. But a 3-year starter, 33 career starts across 50 games. Has been highly productive in the last 3 seasons in which he has taken over as the starting linebacker for Texas. He peaked this year with 96 total tackles, 4 sacks, 10.5 tackles for loss, and 5 passes defensed. This coming in an athletic profile that has quite a bit of explosiveness. This is a 5'5" or a 4'5" linebacker. A lot of burst, a lot of juice, a lot of range. I think those are all words that would very quickly come to your mind when thinking about what DeMarvion Overshown is and is not as a linebacker. So 6'2" 3/4", so almost 6'3", 229 pounds, 32 1/4 inch arms. That's 71st, 12th, and 44th percentile, respectively, of linebacker prospects to come through the NFL Combine since the year 1999. So he's not a big linebacker per se, but he's long and he's lean. And the explosiveness is really where he pops. That 4.56 40-yard dash that he ran in Indianapolis is 88th percentile for NFL linebackers since 1999. His 10-yard split, which is initial explosiveness, 1.59 seconds, is 77th percentile for off-ball linebackers since 1999. and he jumped 124 inches, so 10 feet, 4 inches in the standing broad jump. That is also 88th percentile. It is worth acknowledging he did do the bench press. 15 reps is 5th percentile. Functional strength is not an area that I would regard DeMarvion Overshown as a strength of his game. And again, he's a former safety, so it shouldn't necessarily surprise you that Overshown is someone who the physical components of the game are not where he's really going to hang his hat. Now, that doesn't mean that there's not a likable projection to be found here, because I think that there is. But it's not a slam dunk case, and I think that's reflected in the grade and where I would be considering drafting DeMarvion Overshown, which, of course, we'll finish with at the end of this thought exercise. I took to mockdraftable.com to try to find some inspiring comps as far as athletic profiles. And I'm going to be honest, there aren't many. The top matches, according to mockdraftable.com, which looks at your height, weight, arm length, the athletic tests that you do, and how much overlap that has with other players that have come through the pre-draft process before you. Gerald McGrath, Terrence Smith, Jason Phillips, Jack Sitchie, who I liked out of Wisconsin, Tavares Gooden, Al Wilson, Marcus Lawrence. So a little bit of a unique build as a player. A little bit of a unique body type. And I think that's part of the hesitancy that you often see people have to buy all the way in spite of some really likable traits, which is what we are going to talk about next here on Locked On Dolphins. Something exciting is coming to Built.com on April 22nd. And I'm not a math guy, but I can tell you that's tomorrow. So it's right around the corner. And I have all the details, but the excitement is real. The whispers and the speculation in the Locked On NFL channel is very real. And something you don't want to miss. If you know how Built works, they have the most incredible protein bars in the world, and they do these amazing flavor drops with unreal flavors for limited quantities only. So mark your calendars and head over to Built.com on Saturday, April 22nd, tomorrow, to find out what all the hype is about. I can't wait to discover what their new flavors that they are dropping. Make sure to use promo code LOCKEDON15, and you'll save 15% off your order at Built.com. New flavor drops tomorrow. Overshown is a pretty impressive player in space. The areas that I thought he really shined, his lateral mobility and range, and his motor. Those were two elite traits that I observed for DeMarvion Overshown. Which, if he's going to live in this world, or he's hypothetically a Miami Dolphin, and you're going to play with one other linebacker, your range horizontally is critical because you don't have the extra, your extra run fit players coming from depth oftentimes, or is coming from width. So you have more ground to cover, and you need to be able to do it in quick fashion in the event that the defensive linemen are forcing the back into a cut. And you need to mirror that back in space and scrape over top. I thought his flexibility and fluidity was another thing that really popped. I thought the Alabama game really showcased some of his movement skills in general, his ability to unlock his hips, get depth, transition suddenly. And those transitions for him in space as a zone dropper, he's really got a dynamic base to be able to stick his foot back and get downhill or explode off his back foot to drive and attack the football. And I know I mentioned the range, but that's the best thing about him in my mind, is his range, his effort, the intensity. He's rushing off the right-hand side, and Bryce Young flushes outside the pocket and scrambles going the other way, and Overshown traces back against his grain, back up the arc, and chases him 12 yards downfield to the sideline to help force a stop on third down. Those plays are all over the tape with just really, really good effort plays, which I was surprised for some of the guys that have done them up to 8 linebackers, and we're going to do Drew Sanders next. in this prospect spotlight series. We'll get Drew Sanders done today. I'm hoping to get all the linebackers done today, period. I still have to do Dorian Williams from Tulane and Owen Popo from Auburn. It wasn't always the case that guys' motors ran super hot all the time. Overshown's does, and I think it helps make up for whatever uneasiness that you may or may not have, that this is not like a super robust physical strength player. He can find his way back into plays just by his effort on the field. And that's a hard thing to overlook. It's an easy thing to appreciate. But he's not a complete player by any means. I gave him a failing grade for block deconstruction. I gave him a sufficient grade for competitive toughness. I gave him a sufficient grade for run defending. I gave him a sufficient grade for pass rush ability. And I gave him a sufficient grade for football IQ. So when you think about Jack Campbell at Iowa, and this was a player who got elite scores in 3 categories: competitive toughness, run defending, and motor, and then got great scores in football IQ, tackling, and block deconstruction, and only scored sufficiently in 1 of the 10 categories. This is a little bit more of a bet on traits type of player. And I think that's the pathway for him being a successful player is pretty direct. He'll continue to become more instinctual, continue to find more ways to negotiate through contact. There were too many times where tight ends would get attached on his frame and he would end up on the ground. It was kind of difficult to shake. And Texas did move him around a little bit. So from a versatility standpoint, you like the fact that he's able to move and he's not just stationary in one spot the entire time. But the other side of that coin is if, okay, we're going to go hybrid fronts and we're going to walk you up on the edge of the line of scrimmage. If you can't physically hold your own there, then it doesn't really matter how much time you spend there. And I think that's what really popped to me with Overshown is a lot of his reps when he was walked up on the first line of defense in a wide angle. He didn't have the same appeal as when he was playing from the second level and had more depth to take assertive angles. And his angles and burst and explosiveness allow him to get to the ball carriers in instances where other linebackers that I've watched, including Noah Sewell and Henry To'oTo'o, they try to duck underneath the block to get to the ball carrier and intersect him in the backfield, and they don't get there, and then they end up, because they didn't go over top of the block and meeting the ball carrier 2 yards downfield, it ends up being a big run. I didn't see a ton of those from Overshown because he's got the burst and the closing ability to actually get home. So that's the bright side with Overshown, but he's by no means a complete prospect, and we mentioned the bench press. 15 reps from a functional strength perspective and linebackers in the history of the combine. That's a lower number. And I think that does show up on tape as far as upper body strength and being able to play off of blocks, the ability to separate his chest from blockers and get himself clear and then use that lateral mobility. Still a work in progress. So I don't necessarily look at Overshown and think that he's a definitive upgrade over what the Dolphins have. He graded out as a 78.5 out of 100 points. That is currently good for LB5 in my rankings for Dolphins prospects. The top 3 are Jack Campbell, Dion Henley, and Trenton Simpson. And we're going to reveal number 4 here later today on another episode of the show. And we'll see if Dorian Williams or Owen Popo can crash the party. But as a 78.5, he grades comparably, and I think that the long-term outlook here would be a Jerome Baker replacement is probably the role that I envision as being, putting him in the best position to have success at the NFL level. Now, if that's an investment that you want to make now or not, that's up to them, right? Like that's you only have so many investment opportunities with the way things are currently scheduled right now, and however you want to go about doing that is up to you. If you feel like that's a valuable player to add, now Channing Tindall is, of course, the big mystery component to the linebacker room where the Dolphins brain trust came out this past week and kind of openly admitted, like, yeah, when we drafted him, we kind of had an expectation that was going to be a long-term play. Was long-term play ready to pay dividends now? If it is, great. Oh, I think it'll complicate the matter of drafting a linebacker early. But you would love to see it because they made the decision to invest when they did in Channing Tindall in the 3rd round. But I do think there's a juncture in which Overshown becomes a very sound bet to place. The question is just whether or not the Dolphins have a pick that aligns with where I think that stratosphere is, which is the last thing that we are going to be exploring here on this episode of Locked On Dolphins. I like Overshown quite a bit, but as a 78.5 out of 100 points on my grading scale for the Dolphins, what I would say is this. Of the players that I have graded, and we're up around 58 right now, this is a player who's on the bottom half of that 58-player list. Now, a number of those players, Jalen Carter, Bijan Robinson, Paris Johnson, so on and so forth, are players that you're not expecting are going to be in play for the Dolphins by any means because the Dolphins don't have a pick until 51st in the draft. But the pecking order for Overshown, and he does slot in front of Noah Sewell and Cam Jones at linebacker from Oregon and Indiana, respectfully, probably has him valued in a early day 3 type range, like a 4th-round pick. Dolphins, of course, have a 2, a 3, and nothing until round 6. So you kind of have this vacancy. Would I be super upset if he was the pick at 84? Probably not. I would get it. I think he can take a role for this team. I think he is a long-term Jerome Baker replacement, and in year 2 of a pick at 84, I mean, you're talking probably $900,000 versus Baker's on the books for 14, so you could save effectively $9 million and have the replacement on. You could save $10 million by moving on from Baker after the year, but you take it $900,000 of that, and that would be the actual salary of the player that's taking his spot, presumably, because that's like I think the player that I see parallels with versus who's on the roster right now for the Dolphins. So I wouldn't be upset if he was the pick at 84. I'd be pretty stunned if he was the pick at 51. And in a perfect world, you're probably sliding down the board a little bit to pick up extra draft capital and would use one of those extra draft selections to go get DeMarvion Overshown. Just because the functional strength and the ability to play off of blocks and deconstruct blocks is not a strength, and that's going to always give me a little bit of apprehension, no matter how dynamic or bursty or explosive you are. But if the objective of this defense is we want explosive athletes, he's going to fit the bill. I'll tell you that. And I do think he's a little bit better in true stack opportunities than Trenton Simpson, who graded out higher than DeMarvion Overshown, but did so with the acknowledgement that I think Trenton Simpson is much more of an Andrew Van Ginkel, Baron Browning, Malik Reed type hybrid player as compared to somebody who is truly going to make their living on the second level of the defense. I think Overshown is a better stack linebacker than he is an A-level defender or a pass rusher, and it's not even close. So he's a little bit more of a pure fit than Simpson for what the Dolphins' perceived need is when they went out and they signed David Long and have tried to add to that room. So that's kind of my 2 cents on DeMarvion Overshown. I like this player quite a bit. 78.5 is currently good for 35th on the big board, about 58 players. So he's right in the middle of the pack. Some players around him, Moro Ojomo, who I would advocate for as an early day 3 pick as well. Devin Achane, running back from A&M, who we went over and did a deep dive prospect on the challenges that he presents. Davis Allen, the tight end from Clemson, who reminds me a good bit of Hunter Long. And Hunter Long went in the 3rd round. It's probably a 3rd, 4th round player. So you're talking a middle round draft pick is probably my valuation after doing my evaluation of the player. We got a lot more great content coming your way here on Locked On Dolphins. One final thought for you before I head out of here, and then we get ready to do Drew Sanders. If you're interested in being more involved in the Locked On Dolphins community, you can text Dolphins to 305-419-3924. Sign up for Subtext. It's a chance for you to text directly with me, talk Dolphins football, talk about programming, get to see the big board and all the player grades that I'm giving out in this kind of build-up to the 2023 NFL Draft, some other behind-the-scenes research projects that I do in order to be able to do this show to the best of my ability, giving you guys access to that as well, in addition to kicking around when we're going to do our first film study together, which I'm pretty excited about with the Subtext gang, is give you guys an invitation to come do that. So text Dolphins to 305-419-3924. Get the first 2 weeks free. After that, it's only a couple bucks a month. See if it's a good fit for you and helps you get your Dolphins fix. Regardless of whether or not you do Subtext to get your Dolphins fix, I'd like to think Locked On Dolphins can help you scratch that itch. So make sure you keep it locked in right here on Locked On Dolphins, because it is your team every day. Special shout out to the everydayers who are here and dialed in this path to the 2023 NFL Draft. We're a week away from the Dolphins' first scheduled pick. You can find us, Locked On Dolphins, on YouTube, wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts. Make it a great rest of your day. I'll be back again later to talk about Arkansas linebacker Drew Sanders. Peace and fins up.